Oh, you got your what you calling on?
Welcome to oh, welcome to Resource Thursday with Corvinus Law and Renegade Legal. I'm your host, Paco LeBron. This podcast is where we discuss different ways to run your IT business, whether you're a one-person shop or have multiple employees. This is the place for you. Let me go ahead and introduce my co-host. It is none other than Rick Smith over at Renactus Technology. Rick, how are you today?
Doing good, Paco. Can't complain. How's everything?
You know, can't complain for a Thursday. It's end of the week, and hopefully to finish here strong. So, better than good, better than most, as I like to say. And I also like to go ahead and introduce my guest today is a returning guest, Liz Pifko, managing attorney over at Corvinus Law and a Renegade Legal. Liz, how are you today?
I'm great. Excited to be here. Thank you.
Very cool, very cool. All right, before we go into our conversation with Liz, because it's all about contracts and kind of just the day we're into right now and how to be safe and make sure that you're protected. I'd like to talk about my favorite thing, and that's Techcon Unplugged. Techcon Unplugged is officially back September 16th to the 18th in Chicago at the Hilton Rosemont Chicago O'Hare. It is an all-inclusive ticket when far as food, beverage, and entertainment. You will have to get your hotel and parking, which the details can be found on the website. We did negotiate a very good deal. As you know, that parking in Chicago can be super expensive, but hopefully we got you a good deal as you go ahead over to the hotel. You're going to get real takeaways to bring back to your business from not only like-minded peers, but also with a lot of great vendors and resources that we've enrolled, and just really talking about the day-to-day things that are happening now that's important for your business. And then most importantly, that one-to-one conversation with your fellow MSP, IT service provider, computer repair shop that you're looking for details. Depending on where you are in your journey, they're going to get something out of this show. Tickets are $299, but we have an early bird special of $199 until April 4th. So head over to techconunplugged.com to go ahead and get your tickets now. All right. So as we mentioned, we have Liz on here to talk about a little bit about herself and really kind of just talking about what I feel is a very important topic nowadays with everything going on is making sure you're protected, and just working with your clients, services that you're providing, things of that nature. But Liz, for those that don't know who you are from our previous episode, which we'll link into the show notes, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your firm?
Of course. So, as you said, my name is Liz Pifko, and I own a small business and IP law firm called Corvinus Law. We do exclusively serve small businesses, online entrepreneurs, and as part of that small business crowd, specifically MSPs, which is sort of a specialized niche that, as you may have discovered, not a lot of attorneys deal with. And of course, Renegade Legal is the other half of this, which is not a law firm. It is an online business that sells legal templates and trainings to business owners who can't necessarily afford to work with an attorney right away. As you know, you need to budget these things, and it's not a small amount. But I really believe that nobody should go without some kind of legal protection, even if you're just starting out in your business. So that's what Renegade Legal does.
Very cool. And I think you hit really on a big piece there is that, depending on where the journey of an IT service provider is, you have to really think about agreements and protection for yourself, because you get into this, you owe me this, you owe that, or you were responsible for this. And this kind of this back and forth that kind of goes around. And, there are some vendors and peer groups and things of that nature that try to tackle this problem. But I think from our previous conversation, you've kind of mentioned how this is actually a little bit of a problem as well. Trying to rely on some of those type of templates. Can you share a little bit more about kind of your perspective of, boilerplate templates, or really agreements on, if someone's trying to bank on that as their holy grail to kind of save their skin? What's been your experience with that? And I kind of already know your opinion about it, but I just want to stay
Yeah.
here kind of for everyone to listen on. Like, what's your thoughts on those type of legal agreements that are just boiler templates?
Yeah, so I know there are a lot of legal templates, the general legal templates floating around the internet. You can't, uh, there is no boilerplate legal template that is sufficient to serve as an MSA. If you're an MSP, MSSP, you need to have a proper MSA that is favorable to the MSP, not the client, that is at least somewhat customized for specifically what you're doing. You can't put these things together. These are such specialized agreements for a very complex niche with very nuanced legal needs. You can't just pull terms from any contract and plug it in there and think that you're protected, because most likely you're not. So it's if you're working with that type of template, to me it's usually worse than not having anything at all, because now it gives you that false sense of security that you are being protected, and you don't find out that you're liable for literally everything that goes wrong in this relationship and in your client's IT network. From downtown to data breaches to someone's printer not working, to them not properly submitting service requests properly, or you're responsible for literally everything because your contract doesn't spell out that you're not. I hope that makes sense, because I tend to go on these rants sometimes.
No. And then I think, one of the biggest pieces is, a lot of people say, well, I don't want to, that may have the resources to be able to hire a lawyer or a legal team to get a managed service agreement, an MSA, get an SOW, a scope of work ready. But their thing is like, my clients won't read a 39-page document, or it'll delay the process of them signing the agreement because it's 39 pages. That's why I need a 1 to 2 pager. And I think that's what you just kind of led onto, is just that, you don't have the sufficient ability of really detailing on what you offer and what you can do in that many pages. Can you kind of go into how, I think we talked about this before the show, on how a lot of people feel that that's adequate, but in reality, they're really doing themselves a disservice.
Yeah, and there are so many components to this, and it kind of, to me, it starts with a mindset issue. None of my clients have issues with this type of contract. None of my clients, the MSPs that I work for, have a problem signing this type of document. If your contract is well written and it makes sense and it's readable, well, relatively speaking, readable to the client, they can understand what is going on. Most of your bigger clients will, especially, institutional, like large companies that you work for, they will expect you to have a thorough, detailed MSA that sets forth what you're going to do for this client, exactly, what type of payment structure you have, so they know exactly what they're responsible for month to month. What are your hourly rates? What are your response times, your issue priorities, how they can contact you for service requests, all the little details about terminating the contract, insurance requirements. They want to see this. Maybe there are some little mom and pop, 1-person, 2-person shops that have a problem reading contracts. But as far as the business world at large, we all know that business runs on written agreements. And we all know that it's a requirement. And we all know that it protects both parties to have everybody put their signature where their mouth is. And so both parties can feel confident that, everybody is being held accountable to their promises, both the client and the MSP. So it's I don't really know what to say about that. It's usually the people who, to me, it sounds like, oh, I've been driving a car for 40 years without a seatbelt. I don't need a seatbelt. How do you respond to that? I usually don't. I just drop the conversation. But for the most part, everybody kind of agrees that this is required. And the other element to this is, you might have a perfect, wonderful relationship with a lot of your clients, and there is an element of trust, and that neither one of you would do anything to kind of screw the other person in business. That's just not how you are. And that's perfectly great and everything. But, with the current developments surrounding, huge ransomware attacks, huge demands, astronomical damages that occur when there is a data breach or a ransomware attack, insurance companies are now at their breaking point, and they are coming after everybody that they could recoup their money from. And so even if you have this wonderful relationship with your clients and you perfectly trust each other, if that client has a multi-million-dollar claim and they make a claim to their insurance company, that insurance company is going to pay out to their client and then come after you to recover that loss. And they're not going to respect your, verbal agreement and your great relationship with this client. They don't care about your trust. They don't care, how that you operate on honesty and good faith and fair dealing. They care about their right to subrogate, step into your client's shoes and sue you for anything you might be liable for. And if you don't have an MSA in place limiting that liability, they have the potential to clear you out and sometimes bankrupt your business. And that's how insurance companies operate. I used to litigate for them. So
yeah.
And I know one of the other things.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, I know one of the other things is with insurance, the insurance companies now, even for us as MSPs, the insurance company are asking, do you have a signed contract with every client you do business with? And some of them I've now, my insurance company to date has not asked for, but some of them ask for a copy of that agreement as well to know, what you are promising and what you are agreeing to with your customer, your client. So I know that becomes a very important factor. And one of the other things I did want to bring up is, we hear it a lot. People pick up templates from here and there, and I'll be honest, I was guilty of it as well at a point. You realize too, you can't just pick up a template because certain laws vary from state to state. So what may be applicable for someone who is in Illinois may not, that law is different in New Jersey. And so some of the things that we may say or do or say in the contract that we are responsible for, the law here might say, well, you can't exclude that or you can't include that. So I know that, from just hearing vice versa, people have gotten caught up in those things too, where a contract is really invalid because you have things in there that are not basically accurate to the state you're doing business in.
Yeah. And, that's why it's important to include clauses like if one part of this contract is invalid, it's not going to invalidate the entire contract. We'll just cut out the clause that's invalid, throw it away. On that point, we'll proceed according to general corporate laws of the jurisdiction where this is being litigated. But as to everything else, the agreement stands. And so, this is one of those clauses that reads like people don't really understand what the hell we're talking about there. So they can tend to just cut it out like, oh, we don't need that. This doesn't sound very important. Let's just make the agreement like 4 lines shorter. And, because of that, they now lose out on the enforceability of the entire rest of the contract. Right. So, this is to say that when you're DIYing things, you need to know what you're doing, or you shouldn't be doing it at all, especially not when, potentially millions of dollars of potential damages and liability exposure is at stake. And on the point you made about insurance too, I did want to add that, yes, insurance companies are giant data centers and they know how to evaluate risks in a way that is favorable to them. So when they ask you for your MSA, it's because if you have a bad MSA or no MSA at all, they know that you potentially have unlimited liability exposure, which is greater risk to them. And based on that, they can either raise your premium by thousands of dollars per year or deny you coverage altogether, So even that, like the amount you would save on the premium increase would justify putting something decent in place.
Yeah. I mean, I think with all that too, then yeah, our insurance provider asked that from us and we definitely had to, and it was one of those where it's like, everyone has this. And we're like, yeah, everyone has this. We're like, gotta make sure everyone has this because when I write this policy, and even now, like even with renewals in certain companies, there's certain insurance companies that are just dropping cyber altogether because of the risk of that industry as well. And having those type of agreements are going to help you out in the long run. I think also that there's a big risk on, or not big risk, but I think a lot of IT service providers don't want to even think about contracts similar to what you just mentioned, Liz, is like the legalese, right? Trying to figure out how to get through that, or how, my client's not going to figure that piece out. But on another aspect of that as well is, and I think you made a good point on a post that you had on your Facebook group many months ago, where, sometimes IT service providers get worried or scared when they submit their MSA, and now that, they may have a legal department that pushed back with some changes that they want. And now they're thinking, well, we got to sign to what they want. And there's a way to negotiate that a little bit as well. And that goes back to that afraid of legalese. Can you talk a little bit more about kind of like, it's really not that big a deal to kind of go back and forth on making some changes that are beneficial to both, but also not putting you at risk as well?
Yeah, it's absolutely not a big deal. Every bigger client will have a legal department that will comb through your contract and see if your clauses comply with their internal legal policies. And if not, they will change those clauses to what they want to see in the contract and send it back to you. Some of them, especially the biggest companies, you're dealing with like thousands of users, they will just throw out your MSA and give you their own. So this is something that just happens. That's how it's done. No, we don't like these clauses. Let's make it this instead. Or we're the bigger player. If you don't sign our contract, we will go with the next MSP that will. So I do have to counsel clients through like the initial shock of, oh my God, a lawyer looked at it and said something. Like, is this the end of the world? Are we getting sued? I'm like, no, we're redlining. What are you talking about? So no, but this is what happens all the time. And I redline contracts that I don't like just for my business. I was working with a web developer. I redlined her contract because I just didn't like some of the clauses, the way they were phrased. I replaced it with mine, and now we're good. So it's just a normal part of doing business. So yes, do not freak out. But, I would advise that you do consult with an attorney before just agreeing to all the red lines, because, chances are they're not favorable to you. The original clauses were favorable to you, and now they're changing it to where it's more favorable to them. And especially when it comes to, allocating risks and liabilities, you want to know like exactly how much risk is now being allocated to you under the new agreement. And this brings me to another thing that I want to address, which is something that I get asked all the time, is whether we can just do like a blanket online terms and conditions that applies to everybody. Like, instead of an MSA, can we just put our terms online? And this is the reason that I usually say no, among others, of course. There are issues with enforcement when things are not negotiated properly, or there's no opportunity to negotiate because you just click accept, take it and leave it. But the other thing is, when you agree to certain red lines for one client, are you now editing your online terms and conditions, which apply to all clients? And now you have to put all of your clients on notice that this thing changed because this one client wanted to phrase it differently. And then if you have multiple clients doing that, how are you going to keep track of it? The only way to keep track of it is by separate written amendments for each client. So you're not in this perpetual hamster wheel of editing this contract, and now different clients have different problems with different edits made by these other clients. The only way you're going to keep track of it is by having separate documents. And at that point, you might as well just have them all sign a separate MSA. Right. So that's my little rant on that. Sorry about that. But this is a question that I get all the time, and it's because you're a service provider and because you do negotiate terms to land bigger accounts and you do make concessions. You're not Kaseya, let's say, because their terms were in the news for many weeks recently. You're not that company. You can't just put up some terms and take it and leave it. You end up negotiating them, and it just does not work.
So I guess the question is, because everyone, I guess I'll just say this, not MSP training that we get basically from each other, is what I'm saying. We always hear the term you need to put something on your terms and conditions or something online. So given what you just said, what should go online? Is there anything general as far as your terms and conditions that should go online?
Yeah, but that's a website document. So that's not an MSA. That's just your online terms and conditions spell out how visitors can use your website, can use the information on the website, what they can and cannot do on your website. And basically that if they hire you for services, those are subject to the terms and conditions that are in the MSA. So you might put some other policies that never change from client to client, but it's unnecessary if you're having them sign an MSA.
Okay.
So there's something in Rick, you kind of made a kind of triggered something I've been hearing lately too, where there are a lot of IT service providers that have either been in court or have been sued because, you know, they weren't doing their job on what it is. But the legal arguments from the opposing counsel has been that, hey, the way you're marketing yourselves on your website and the wording of the marketing on your website is high premium managed service provider, all inclusive, high end class, and they're using some of these terms and that type of marketing against them on how they should have been providing service to their client. Liz, is there anything that you have seen toward that, or like what people probably should be looking at their website and making sure that they're not putting certain things? Because I know there's like certain terms, like for example, hey, you put on there, you are protecting our systems, and really it should be more of a mitigation or mitigating systems. Like there's a lot of terms that have been talked about of swapping. What's your take on a marketing language on a website for an IT service provider in a legal?
Yeah, I do review websites for congruency. So it's really important that what's on your website, what you say on the sales calls, what you say in the proposal, and what you say in the contract is not contradictory. You can't have inconsistencies between what's on the website and what's in all these, you know, different places, because that brings up this whole very expensive can of worms that, you know, will take you tens of thousands of dollars to litigate. But also just your marketing message in itself, you shouldn't be implying that your client is guaranteed protection. So there are lots of ways to say it, but yes, using mitigation versus guarantee is, I would advise that as well, because you can't guarantee protection.
Right.
You can't say, your marketing message shouldn't be leaving the client with an understanding that they will be absolutely protected from all cyber risk, and there is no chance that a hacker will ever get into their system and, you know, encrypt their data or steal their data. That should never be the message. It's not even congruent with, you know, your other internal documentation that requires, you know, certain procedures to respond to a breach, to mitigate a breach. Clients need to understand that a breach is possible, regardless of what type of protection they have in place. You can say that you're using, you know, what's the word? I was trying to think of it too quickly, but you know, that you're using sort of state-of-the-art protections that are industry standards, you know, that are best in the industry. Best practice, yes, and not saying that they're some kind of ultimate protection, because they're not, but they are best in the industry. They are the best tool that the world has to offer right now. But don't make it sound like it will absolutely protect you from literally everything. Yeah. So yeah, I do a fair bit of copywriting now that I think about it. I need to charge more for that.
So here's a question. As MSPs, and particularly the audience that we're speaking to, we're at all different levels of as in terms of size and income. So we have to, you know, budgeting becomes very important. And like you say, it could be getting a contract done, drawn up properly from a good lawyer could cost a good piece of change, good couple of dollars. And I'll just say, so for our audience, if you had to give advice, I guess, I don't know if that's the right word, where would you start? Like, what would you say has to be the absolute bare minimum you should be running any type of business with? Does that make sense?
And
What I'm asking?
And one thing to add to what you're saying as well is we want to make sure that when you're looking at multiple services for your business, accounting, CPA, legal representation, etc., they should not be viewed as a cost, but more as an investment, because it's more of the piece of you rather pay that than the fines that are going to come after the fact, that because you didn't have them. They always say that it's better to have a lawyer before when the stuff hits the fan before after. But I would just add that caveat on, for those that understand it's an investment and are not trying to nickel and dime their way out of it, but really trying to figure out, but they really, have to dedicate resources or figure out how to dedicate resources. What's the best way for them to start that journey to make sure that they can get that proper representation?
So the way I've heard this same expressed that really stuck with me is something along the lines of expenses get cut, but budgets don't. So get on the budget. And that's kind of how my brain has been framing it for many years is, legal needs to be in your budget. And you need to budget at least, $10K to be fully protected, covered, and this includes, spending money on attorneys if you have questions, because you will have questions when clients come back with edited MSA. But budget that to have at least your MSA, your basic policies, and kind of a full review of your business and where you might be making inconsistent promises and where things need to be tightened up in order to kind of start with that protection. And over the years, you will, of course, spend more than that. But, I usually recommend the 10K budget. And if that is absolutely a deal breaker, it's never going to happen, try to make 5K happen and get an MSA at the very least, because no MSP should be doing business in this type of environment, like what we're seeing with cybercrime right now, and MSPs and supply chains being actively targeted, and ransoms being in the millions of dollars and damages being in the millions of dollars. And now individual lawsuits, even class actions being filed because, certain people in the chain were allegedly negligent or in breach of their agreement. Like in this environment, since the world has gone completely insane, I would say no MSP, not a single one of you should be doing business without an MSA.
Without a proper MSA.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Please not something you stole from your competitor, because you don't know where they got it either.
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly. Now I know we're going toward the end of the episode, but I did want to make time for what you're doing over at Renegade Legal, and really on how you are trying to combat this ability for someone to get a proper MSA. I know you've been working on it for a little bit now, and just curious on if you wanted to share that and see if this is maybe a viable option for IT service providers that are looking to, just step up their game with what they have right now.
Yeah. So I know we've talked about it for, a year, and I have been working on it. But yes, it's finally done. I created a template package for MSPs to get started, covering their legal bases. And it became this just really comprehensive package. I discovered that about myself along the way, that I don't like to give incomplete solutions. It's either a complete solution, the full package, or nothing. So I created this template package that includes, your core MSA, which is the basic terms that shouldn't really change from client to client, your pricing schedule, your service schedule, liability waivers, client handbook if you want to use one for things that, really shouldn't be in the MSA to make it super long, like issue priorities, response times, how to request services, things that need to be binding on the client, but, shouldn't be making your MSA like 50 pages long. So client handbook, some basic policies for the client to follow, like your password policy, remote working policy, incident reporting policy. A lot of MSPs have asked me for these things because they just don't know like what these even should look like going to the client. So I put a couple of those together. You can look at them for wording and just adapt to your business as needed. It includes a statement of work for project-based work. Also added, what else? A risk assessment agreement template, which I know a lot of MSPs are doing initial risk assessments as kind of to start the conversation with the client and really show them the vulnerabilities in their network, which then leads to the sale and higher monthly revenues as well. So there is, kind of a shorter contract for that initial assessment that still lays out some legal protections, but it's not a full-blown MSA. You don't want to send them 30, 40 pages right away, for just this one little thing. So that's what the risk assessment is for. I'm adding today a business associate agreement because a lot of my MSP clients are, serving clients that needs to be HIPAA compliant. And for that, you need a business associate agreement. Probably will be adding a subcontractor agreement for that as well, because when you're a business associate under HIPAA, you also need to ensure that your subcontractors comply with the same requirements. And, I'm just constantly adding to it. There's a monthly Q&A with me. So there is that element of hand-holding, video training, walking you through the handbook, the MSA. Not everything right now, but the most important parts have video trainings that you can come back to over and over again. So you don't have to, schedule a consultation with a lawyer for $300, $400, $500 an hour to get a question answered or something that you could just use a refresher on. You can just go back to the training and look at that, revise for a client if they have questions. So yeah, there is a lot included in there. I don't have the entire package in my brain because it just got done. And we literally just published the sales page yesterday. But yeah, if you're interested, it's at renegadelegal.co. That's CO. So don't use .com. renegadelegal.co/MSP. And if you use the coupon code MSP Unplugged, you get $500 off. So
very cool.
That's my pitch on that.
We'll make sure to put that in the show notes along with the code. And yeah, I think this is a great opportunity for those that are trying to, again, get either, if you don't have an MSA, as you heard from Liz, you better get your butt off and actually get one in. If you're using one that you feel like is a little outdated and probably you're not very comfortable in understanding what's going on, or if you feel like you're bulletproof, you should still look at this because you're going to probably see some things that you probably didn't think of, because there are those of us that have just started this journey. There are those of us that have been doing this for quite a bit. And as she mentioned, and there's a lot of things that have changed, especially in the last 18 months to 2 years, especially, let alone the last 6 months with a lot of things that are coming out that we need to really understand. So I encourage you to head over there. Definitely make it your while to understand. All full disclaimer, Liz is my attorney, so she has helped me on quite a few things as well. So she does know what she's talking about. She is good at what she does. So I implore you to go ahead and head over to that URL as well. So Liz, really appreciate you taking out the time to speak with us today. Is there any lasting thoughts or anything you'd like to share with the listeners before we sign off?
I think we've covered everything. Only other thing I would say, if you want to email me and get in touch with me personally, just email me at liz@corvinuslaw.com. I will respond to everyone. I don't leave anyone hanging. So if you've got some questions about working with me directly, go ahead and shoot me an email and I will respond. You can also find me on Facebook. I do quite a lot of Facebooking.
Yep. We'll link your Facebook group as well, because I believe it's a great area for people to ask questions and just work with other like-minded people that are just trying to understand a little bit more as well.
Great.
Perfect. Well, again, Liz, really appreciate you coming out. We're hoping that we'll get you over to Techcon here in September. So we'll see if that aligns with your schedule as well. Rick, where can people find you nowadays?
I'm always in the same place. You can reach me personal, rick@renactus.com, or I'll give you my plethora of emails, rick@mspunplugged.com. I'm going to give Paco gives the spiel in the beginning about Techcon Unplugged. I give the spiel at the end, and I'm just going to encourage everybody again, as we are getting closer and closer, we are find ourselves working harder and harder to try to make sure that this Techcon Unplugged is the best we've put on. So we ask everyone, any questions, any comments, any suggestions, please reach out to us. Tell us what you think. Tell us what you think we can do to improve, what we can take out, anything like that. Any suggestions on some of the breakout topics we're having. We're listening. Our ears are wide open for any suggestions, because again, to steal a phrase, MSP Unplugged, Techcon Unplugged is for us, by us, right? So this is for our community. So we are actively trying to make sure that we all get what we need, that we can take home to help our businesses grow. So again, reach out to us, info@mspunplugged.com. If you don't want Paco to know your suggestions, you can do me personally at rick@mspunplugged.com. But we'll be looking forward to hearing from everyone.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, everyone, appreciate you tuning in. Come join us every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Central and Thursdays at 9 a.m. I know Tuesdays have been a little bit sparse in the last couple of weeks. Me and Rick will be fixing that. We have some ideas on making sure that show is more on a consistent basis. If you want to watch the video podcast, head over to youtube.com/MSP Unplugged, or you can head over to our Facebook page, facebook.com/MSP Unplugged. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification button so you never miss an episode. You can always use your favorite podcatcher to take us wherever you go. We're on Amazon Music, Spotify, and on Apple Podcasts. Again, thank you for listening, and we will see you next time on MSP Unplugged.